and I didn't understand it actually. We did sometimes spend some time, limited time at home at the house together. We didn't hang out a lot of time because there were 6 years between us. And so I think there were a few occasions we watched telly together in the lounge downstairs sometimes. I think we watched Eurotrash sometimes. A bit odd considering actually. He was getting quite into religion and I think taking the lead from his mother. He was sort of getting into preaching much more at that age. He went to a church school. In fact, he went to the cathedral school. You know, he was very big and involved with the choir at that school there. And so very much into sort of choirs and all that sort of thing. And we spent a bit of limited time at home, you know. Often hear him singing or practicing for some performance or something, and he and Anna would be sort of sharing time or chatting about various things. They sometimes did chat more. I think there were a couple of times where he and I had spent some time together. It's only in hindsight now, I look back and think it's a bit weird. Well, we did have a time when at his suggestion, we played a game of Truth or Dare. And it involved sort of various weird things that we were doing. I think it ended up me having a bath and he was weeing in a bath. And that was a little bit weird. But I think that there was other weird incidents that involved us both. This naked wrestling that we were doing in a hotel room because we'd gone abroad as a family to Tenerife. But I don't think there was anything beyond. I can't remember anything beyond those two incidences that I would say is a bit inappropriate at the very least, given the fact I must have been like 13, 14, about that age. You know, he'd be about 18, 19 then. I didn't see him that often. You know, he had a lot of other places. He was out of the house a lot of the time, visiting his groups often. He had a young friend, Darren, that he'd hang around with a lot. They were out together quite a lot, visiting. You know, I would see Anna sometimes, not that often. You know, there was an incident at school where she helped me out a lot. You know, she told some guy, some friend of hers, that I was being sort of some bullied a bit, and he sort of stuck up for me at school out of her request, and that was nice actually. And I think I saw the guy one day when I was bunking off a lesson, and he said like, "Oh, don't say anything," and I won't. But yeah, we got on all right, me and Anna. You know, when we did talk and see each other, I think she may have had her own issues that I did at that time as well. And you know, I subsequently learned that she did know about her mother's affairs, and you know, she knew that her mum had had an abortion as a result of one of them, and she had to carry all this and keep it secret from her father. So I think that was very difficult for her to carry actually, and I think she too went through a really hard time. And I think, you know, I didn't know any of that at the time. I think I had my own struggles, as we all did. I think we probably had limited time with each other. There were the family holidays. We went away to a place in Wales each year. There was a place in Oxford we went to. I gather it was a gentleman friend of Christine's that she'd actually had a relationship with, I think. Bizarrely, I think it was a fellow vicar, but she had a number of different relationships with a few different men. And we went up to his Oxford house for a holiday a few summers. It was a beautiful house. We had use of the garden. We had some nice times up there, actually. You know, me and Peter made a little den in the garden like we used to do, and we'd run around and play games. You know, we had some nice times actually together. You know, so, and I think there were some nice occasions too, actually. And, you know, it wasn't all screaming and sort of weird punishments. There were some really nice occasions, actually. Or we did go on some journeys. We did some camping. You know, we went out. We sort of had days out. We walked through nature. And, you know, we went to historic places and museums and treats. And so, you know, there were a fair share of different holidays that we went on as well. It's a very sort of assorted amount of different things that happened. I'm talking about over, you know, many years, actually. I think it got to a point where actually well, Christine told me that she was seeing a guy. She has started a relationship with Bob, who was the taxi driver. He used to drive my foster brother to his school and back. And actually, in fact, at the time, we found it a bit kind of in bad taste, because he used to come over every Sunday and have dinner with us, with the family, with Richard even at the time. And so, you know, it looked quite bad, actually, the fact that, you know, he'd gotten to know the family through the disabled child, you know, and met the father, the husband of the woman he was seeing. And but I suppose it was a shame how they ended it as they did. But I suppose she fell in love with him and wanted to start a new relationship. And I was about 14, 15 perhaps at the time. Peter was quite a bit younger. Both Anna and Daniel were that much older at the time. I think they were out working, busy, and so they were they'd moved on more. So I think perhaps Christine had decided it was time for her to move on. She met Bob and had struck up a good relationship with him and wanted to move on and live with him, I think, at that point. So I was in total shock the day she told me they were having a relationship, and just really just amazed at it. I mean, I knew her to be quite angry sometimes, quite, not just angry, but quite an authority figure, you know, quite determined, you know, quite vocal, quite organised. I knew her as all these things. I didn't ever imagine her. I knew there were some marital issues. They got along where they could most of the time. There were occasional arguments, you know, but I was in complete shock when she told me. I still remember the day now. And I think we had an upset, and I may have said, you know, you've ruined this family or something. You know, I was pretty bad in my choice of words, but I think it was very upsetting and hard for Richard. It was a total shock for him. She told him about the affair, that she'd been seeing Bob for however long, some months it had gone on. She was moving in to start a new life with him. Their marriage was over. She didn't tell him at that point there had been affairs in the past, but he later learned from other people that came forwards. A number of people then came forward to say they had knowledge Christine had had some affair with another man, but they thought they were the only ones that knew, and they kept it secret, you know, not wanting to harm Richard or the family at that point. And I think that's, you know, quite a number of people, including Anna, were carrying that burden and thinking they alone knew what had happened. I think several people came to talk to Richard about that after she'd left him. So he got to know not just that that affair recently had happened, but that there had been a number of affairs over the years. And I think he was shell-shocked. It just baffled him. He had no real idea that it was going to happen. He carried on, and he was as supportive as he could be to me. He tried his best. Me and Peter remained at the house at that point. Peter went off to visit Chrissy and Bob, who were living together in another residence. So Peter, it was quite hard for him. He was going between the two houses. I didn't know. I didn't want to see Christine, and that was the end of our relationship at that point. You know, I was just didn't want to see her. I was quite upset with her, really. But Peter did, and Peter had become quite dependent upon her. I mean, to her credit, she was very supportive and helpful to him in his physical disability. She allowed him to have the right equipment, to have the right access to getting to different groups and the right kind of support. She was very forthright about achieving that and supporting him. So I think she did so well with that. And when she put her energy into supporting him and others, you know, credit to her, you know, she did well. And he kept visiting her for that support. I think it was really hard for Peter, you know, to be hearing all this stuff about her. He obviously sees it from her side with Bob as well, you know, sees that she wanted to make a fresh start and she wanted to move on at that point, you know, but then he's coming back to me and to Richard and to how hurt he is and the situation we're in. I didn't feel that upset, to be honest. But in any case, I felt quite, well, not relieved, but it was like I was kind of not happy. I felt kind of more relaxed, actually, to be honest, at that time. So for me, nobody was shouting anything at me anymore. So I felt good about that. And so I was going out more at that point. In fact, I was going out and doing all sorts of more things, to be honest, at this point. So yeah, there's a whole story in that. I'll come on to the next chapter. But I suppose I was relieved in a sense, but Christine left a huge gap there as well, and a lot of unanswered questions that we were all struggling to deal with, really, because she really loved the lecture. And I mean, she was a priest, she was ordained, at least in a Protestant church, a vicar at least. And she moved around to various churches. Some didn't get on with her so well as others that did. People had very mixed feelings about her. Some people did feel that she was a bit overbearing, I heard from some, seemed to sort of be a bit too controlling. Other people liked the fact that she was quite outspoken, and so people were quite divided about her, and seemed to be varied opinions on her. But I certainly sort of felt, it was good to have a time away from her, actually, for, it was sort of, and not be sort of so shouted at, I suppose. At the very least, she did contribute a lot, but I did feel it was an awful situation for Richard. He certainly continued providing for us as much as he could, and working as well. He was still working at that point. He took us to Isle of Wight, me and Peter, as much as he could. But I know he was really struggling with it. It must have been an awful thing for him. He'd been lied to for how many years, the person that he trusted so much. I feel for him, really. It's just, I just think he is such a kind and devoted person. I feel like it was the deception more than the actual thing. I feel that the fact that, so much of it, he felt that there was so much of what had gone on in his own house that he didn't know, and I think that it was that element, that whole deception and the longevity of it that really got to him, actually. And I think it really knocked it out of him. I think it was a terrible thing that happened to him, really. I don't think there was that much support. But I do know one day he went out of the house. I know he'd been quite depressed, and I was quite concerned for him. And I thought he was out of character, the way he didn't respond to me. And as he went out, and I called his mother to say, there's something wrong with him. She called the minister, and fortunately was able to drive by and get to him in time. So, he made an attempt on his life, and, he hit a real low point, and, I guess it affected him deeply, and, he really, was emotionally, hurt, in terrible pain at that. It was a terrible thing that happened. Fortunately, the hospital saved him, and, his stomach was pumped. He was okay. And there was a very nice ending, actually. There was a lady started visiting him regularly, and that had known him from before. They struck up a good friendship, and they became, very close friends, and later, married and had a very happy relationship. So I'm really happy for him that worked out, actually, and it was a really wonderful thing, actually. And, it was a real hardship that he went through, and so I'm just grateful that he got through that, and he was very supportive to me in moving out of home. I decided about age 17 to move out, actually, and get my own place. I started living my own double life. I wonder if we all were, actually, at that house. I wonder how many of us were living double lives. And in any case, I felt I had these attractions towards men at some points, and I don't know why I felt it really. I don't know if it's a result of things that have happened or just just the way I felt anyway. I don't know. I went to a youth group and met it was an LGBT youth group called Freedom Youth actually, and I got a bus up there and I met some people in a group one day. And there was a guy, Michael, that I met. We became very close, and yeah, you know, he sort of came back to the house one day actually, and it was a very embarrassing moment. I think we must have passed out downstairs in a bed together, and Richard must have walked in the room and saw us. Didn't say anything, and he did ask me at some point, "Is that your boyfriend?" And I said, "No, of course not." Right, really offended, and nothing more was ever said, of course. And you know, I just said, "Oh, I needed somewhere to stay," and just passed out, you know. And you know, I suppose, you know, I was very confused about my feelings during that time, to be honest. There have been one or two occasions I'd shared a bed with a guy, but as a friend. And I suppose I had those feelings, and quite embarrassingly had made some sort of advance on someone who sort of said, like, "What are you doing?" And I sort of said, "Oh, sorry, nothing. I don't know." Sort of pretended the next day I was sort of asleep. And anyway, so I did have those kind of feelings. I don't know why, really. I don't know if it was as a result of things I'd watched or things that had happened. It's a bit weird. Joan, my foster grandmother, was over one day watching a film with me called Priest. It was all about a gay priest, funnily enough, who was helping the congregation who were going through various trials, and one of the girls reported that she was being sexually abused, and he was trying to support her through it. And he had his other double life, you know, going out and having gay affairs and that. And I think Jones said during the film, "Oh, I think you better not watch this part." And when she was child-minding me, but she had no idea where the film was going. In fact, she was quite homophobic too. I discovered that from a few conversations. She was pretty old school and conservative. You know, she really felt it was a perverse thing, and she felt it was something pretty bad, pretty sort of something to be shamed or hide, and something, you know, that was her sort of view in it. We got on very well, and you know, I would never discuss anything. She had that Victorian mentality, out of sight and out of mind, you know, don't bring shame on the family or anything. So she was very orthodox and conservative like that. She wasn't really a happy, clappy church goer or anything like Christine and Daniel, though, or, you know, she wasn't evangelical or anything, nothing like that. You know, she just had her sort of own beliefs, I think. But yeah, it was my own kind of feelings sort of at that time. It was very weird, really. I don't know why it was. I still wonder, looking back now, you know, whether it's genetic or whether it's choice or whether it's situations that you're in, whether things that happen to you and that surround you influence you. And I do kind of suspect it's a combination of those, probably, if I'm honest. I wrote a letter to this pen pal, this girl that I was chatting to, and said to her about the homosexual feelings. I don't know why I even wrote that. And she, understandably, she was quite upset about that, and that was the end of us writing to each other at that point, actually. But in any case, I can understand people have divided feelings about it, and I do too sometimes. But I had those feelings, and you know, I don't know why really. But so anyway, I went to this youth group, met this guy called Michael. We got on very well, actually. Yeah, you know, he was kind of fun to hang out with. He was kind of down to earth, friendly, funny. We got on, and I wanted to move out of home as well, really, and move on. Rachel was, you know, my stepfather's new girlfriend. She was visiting the house more often. They were getting along very well. It was really nice to see that they both moved on. Chrissy and Bob were getting on well together. You know, Peter split his time between visiting each of them. And it seemed like people were moving on, actually. And so it seemed like, to me, a good time to move on as well, actually. And that's what I did, I suppose. So, yeah, I moved on, and